Hi, my name's William Douglas. I go by Bill most of the time, but I wrote a book called The Gospel of Science, Mind-Blowing New Science on Ancient Truths to Heal Our Stressed Lives and Planet. And I was driven to write this book for a lot of different reasons. The main reason is because I had some extraordinary consciousness experiences. One when I was really young, uh, like 6 years old, and then and then several in my early 20s. And I didn't talk about them for a long time because, you know, it just seemed weird to talk about. There was really no social approval for talking about these kind of things. And what happened, a series of things happened, but I ended up spending my life, I'm almost 70 now, and I spent a lot of my life collecting science that would validate some of the experiences that I had and some of the things that came out of those experiences. And one of the things that we did over a period of years is we spent a year talking to leading scientists on human consciousness and mind-body practices and the power of mind-body practices to help us relax out of the way of the greater potential of human consciousness. And that was really eye-opening for me. And that was one of the things that led to one aspect of the Gospel of Science, second edition book that I just finished not that long ago. And what that was extraordinary consciousness experiences. There's a lot in the book. The main gist of the book is the science on mind-body practices, how they can dramatically improve our health on many different levels, and help us heal from chronic health issues that we have and challenges, mental, emotional, physical, all these things. And the science on all that is massive. And I meticulously endnoted everything in the book because I knew that people wouldn't believe it because I knew that they would think, wow, if this was true, if this could really do all these things for me, I'd be hearing it on the news. But you don't. And I get into all that in the book of why we're not hearing about these incredibly profound potential of our consciousness and how mind-body practices, Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, meditation, and mindfulness are all proven to powerfully unleash this just power of our consciousness that's just below the surface, but it's starting to peak out for a lot of people. And a lot of people, I realized after talking to the scientists, are having extraordinary consciousness experiences all over the planet. So part of the reason that I wrote the book was to give people like you who are having extraordinary consciousness experiences some validation so that you'll feel comfortable in the experience that you had and that you'll also know how to nurture that experience to get the most that you can get out of these precious gifts that we're given that science calls extraordinary consciousness experiences. And so, one of the things that happened with me was when I had, in my 20s, when I had this big extraordinary consciousness experience, I started writing. And I'll tell you this story in a little bit, but I don't want to get into it right now because the main thing that I want to talk about right now is the fact that one of the scientists that we spoke to was Dr. Kim Penberthy from the University of Virginia Department of Perceptual Studies. And so they study human consciousness. And one of the studies that she spoke about, which really was riveting for me, and it may be for you as well, is that they they took a group of people. There was a study where they took a group of people and they taught them all how to meditate. And then during the course of this meditation training, they had them all journal and describe, changes that were happening in their lives and stuff. And over 50% of these people that they had taught to meditate started reporting extraordinary consciousness experiences. Now, that could be anything from like synchronicities, where you think of somebody and the phone rings and it's them, or, you pull into a parking lot and that perfect parking lot opens. Somebody's pulling out of that perfect parking space right when you're pulling in. And I know that sounds egotistical, and I'll get into why that's not in a moment. But yeah, that was really eye-opening because that showed me that I wasn't the only one that was having these extraordinary consciousness experiences. And so I had written this book because I wanted people to feel comfortable with their extraordinary consciousness experiences, and also, like I said, learn how to, get the most out of it. And so I wrote down my experiences so that people could see how I went through that, and then get that personal validation, know that they're not weird, know they're not strange. You're not weird and you're not strange if you have one. But also, the other thing I realized through my experiences was that I think almost all of us are having extraordinary consciousness experiences on a regular basis. But one of the things that meditation does is it slows down the consciousness, it slows down the mind. And so our brain isn't dancing around all over the place all the time. And then when an extraordinary consciousness experience happens, we notice it. And then if we know that this is normal and it's not weird, then we value it. And then we start to pay attention to it. And then we start to get more out of it. Because what will happen is when we have these extraordinary consciousness experiences, it's so easy to just dismiss it as, oh, that must have been a dream, or that must have been an illusion. uh, a what's the word? It's right on the tip of my tongue. Uh, a hallucination. And so we'll just dismiss these things, and then they just go into the ash bin of history. And we get busy with our normal lives trying to figure out how to pay the rent and get the kids to school and all that kind of stuff. And so I hope that you'll stay tuned with this, and I hope you'll consider getting the second edition, the new second edition of the Gospel of Science, Mind-Blowing New Science on Ancient Truths to Heal Our Stress Lives and Planet, and tell other people about it. Because these extraordinary consciousness experiences, what they are is they're gifts. They're gifts from the universe or from the divine, however you perceive it. You don't have to be religious. That's what all the science shows, to have experiences like this. So you're welcome to think of it as the universe. I grew up in a, a Lutheran family. My people weren't like hyper religious, but they wanted to expose me to some kind of spiritual grounding, and so they ended up putting me in Bible school, Sunday school, and all that kind of stuff. And then I drifted away because there was a lot about religion that really didn't make that much sense to me. And I know I'm not alone because the data shows the number of people that are consider themselves formally religious is dropping. But the number of people that consider themselves spiritual is exponentially expanding. And so, we're all kind of in this same boat where we're trying to make sense of life. And that's how I approach my Sunday school studies. In fact, when I was graduating from high school, my Sunday school teacher who taught me when I was a really little kid, like first, second grade, he came up to my parents and I didn't recognize him. I mean, he was older, I was older. And he introduced himself to my parents and he said, yeah, he said, Bill was in my Sunday school class when he was little. And he said, he was the most difficult student I ever had. And my parents were like, what the hell was he doing in that class? But he said, oh, no, no. He said he wasn't misbehaving. He said he kept asking me questions that I didn't have the answers to. So that was my approach to religion. I was trying to find answers. So, I was a seeker, and we all are. We're trying to figure out how to get through these lives and and to remember the magic of our lives. And so that's how I approach religion. That's how I approach everything, these spiritual experiences that I had. That's why I spent 40 years collecting the science because I was trying to make sense of what had happened to me. And so, yeah, with me, what happened was, like I said, I had this extraordinary experience in my 20s that was life altering. And the reason it was life altering is because I paid attention to it and I started writing about it. So I'm going to get into the importance of journaling here in a moment. But the other thing I wanted to mention was that after I had that experience, after I started meditating, actually before I had that experience, when I started meditating, I had this feeling kind of like floating. And this is real common. When we let the brain let go of control, sometimes we'll get a sense of kind of free fall or floating or drifting or something like that when we have our eyes closed meditating. And and then I remembered an experience that I had when I was 6 years old. And I'm just going to share this with you. Just I mean, I love to talk about it now that I feel comfortable talking about it. And so, what my hope is the Gospel of Science, second edition, and also this video. It'll just make all of us more comfortable about talking about these things, these experiences that we have. I think that's so healthy to be able to just talk about these things. And I didn't for a lot of years. I would start to talk about it, with like my children or whatever. And, they get really uncomfortable because they thought I was going insane. But I'm not. I'm more sane than I've ever been before. And it's been a long journey. I think we've all had those. But anyway, what happened was I had an angelic experience. Now, was this an angel? I don't know. I mean, that's what it looked like to me when I was 6 years old. But when it first appeared, it was very amorphous. It looked like it was kind of made out of water. It was beautiful. It was translucent, and there was like a light. It was like it had its own light, and it looked like an angel, with the wings and everything like that. But it was kind of, I don't know. It looked like it was kind of uh, non-material when I first saw it. Now it did feel material more as I go through the story, and so then as I was an adult, I was trying to make sense of it. After it came back to me, and then I started writing about it, and that way I didn't forget about it again. But one thing I saw a movie called Contact with Jodie Foster. Which is it's a great movie. Carl Sagan, the great scientist, wrote it, the script, and it's a really beautiful movie if you haven't seen it. Uh, makes you think about a lot of things. But anyway, there's this one scene. It's where she's having an encounter with extraterrestrials, and she can't see them or anything, but they're taking her through wormholes. She's going through this incredible experience, and then all of a sudden, it just plops her down on this beach that looks like a beach in Pensacola, Florida, is what it looks like. Because when she was a child, she was fixated on Pensacola, Florida. You'll see when you watch the movie. But anyway, so she's on this beach, out in space somewhere, but it looks like Pensacola, Florida. And this figure comes walking down the beach, kind of materializing. It looked kind of liquid at first, kind of like this angel that I saw. But then as it got closer to it, it was a person that was really solid. And it was her father who had passed away when she was a young girl. And she goes, Dad, and she's like hugging him. I mean, she's really moving. And then all of a sudden, her scientist mind starts to kick in, and she goes, "Wait a minute." She goes, "Are you really my father?" And the father figure smiles, and "That's my daughter." I think he called her Spark. He goes, "That's my Spark." He said, "That's that scientific mind." He said, "No, we just felt like it would be easier for you to relate to us if we took on this image." And so that made me wonder about this angelic experience. Was the universe trying to speak to me? Uh, but it came to me in a image that would feel comforting to a young, 7-year-old Lutheran boy in Western Kansas, and that would be an angel. And so anyway, what happened was I was lying in bed in the back of the Blue Star Motel office. My parents had a really small, struggling motel called the Blue Star Motel. And so me and my parents slept in the office just in case somebody wanted to check in during the night. And so I was sleeping with my mother. My dad slept in one bed, me and my mother and my dog slept in the other bed, my dog Lady. And and so I'm laying there, and it's about 3 o'clock in the morning. It's in the middle of the night. And I don't know. I just had this, I kind of woke up and I had this feeling like somebody was looking at me. And I kind of peeked out from under the covers, and I looked down towards the foot of the bed. And there was this angel. Like I said, it looked like crystal or liquid crystal with a light, but it looked, like an angel, wings and everything. And it wasn't verbal, but it was just like it was saying, come to me. It was communicating with me. It was saying, come to me. And, there was nothing threatening about it. There was nothing to be frightened about that I can recall. But, a 7-year-old boy, uh, seeing something like that, it kind of scared me, right? And so I didn't want to go. And then all of a sudden, I felt myself being pulled towards this angelic figure. And so what I did was I tried to reach out and grab my mother and grab my dog. And I remember what happened was my hands just went right through them. And I didn't, it took me many decades to understand this, but then when I started seeing the science on out of body experiences, where we can come out of our bodies, then it feels like normal, feels like we're just in our body, just like normal. And I have a feeling that if I would have turned around and looked back at the bed, I would have seen my sleeping body laying there. Because, like I said, my arms just went right through my dog and my mother. So, that tells me that that it wasn't my physical body. It was my amorphous energy body that was having an out of body experience. And so anyway, so I'm drawn to this angel. And then once I get in its arms, I feel perfectly safe. I feel perfectly safe and I feel very warm. And I remember it was a cold winter night, a clear, cold winter night. And then all of a sudden, once I'm in this angel's arms, we're like lifting up above the before I continue this, one of the things I want to say is that a lot of times these extraordinary consciousness experiences aren't this dramatic. It can be small things. Like I said, like you think of somebody and then that's them when the phone rings. And so I don't want to make you think that your extraordinary experiences have to be this extraordinary, and because they can be very meaningful and very important, even if it's a subtle experience that you have. And so I'm going to get more into that's why it's so important to journal these experiences when they come up and not just slough them off and go, oh, that was a dream or, that wasn't important. Because when you get these, you'll get something in your mind that'll say, this is important, but then it's really easy to forget that was important and just get tangled up in life. But anyway, just to continue the story. So all of a sudden we're lifting up and all of a sudden I'm looking down at the roof of the Blue Star Motel and I'm seeing my small Western Kansas town, Ellis, Kansas, beneath everything. And then this angel is like flying me across our town, and it's wild because I'd never been in an airplane or anything. I was a poor Midwestern, farm town kid back in the 60s, and so it was really wild to see all that. And then it flew me to the Lutheran church that my parents went to on Sundays. Not every Sunday, but a lot of Sundays. But I went there every Sunday for Sunday school. So even if they didn't go, I went. Yeah, they made sure I went. And so anyway, this angel, it lands me in this alleyway in between the church and the Sunday school that I went to. The church my parents went to and the Sunday school I went to. The only time the kids went over there that I can remember is when we were doing a play or singing songs or something for the church. And so anyway, we're in this alleyway, me and this angel, and it puts me down on the I think if my memory serves correctly, it was like a brick walkway. It was brick, and and so I'm standing on this brick walkway, and this angel starts to teach me how to take long in breaths, and then long sighing exhales. And what happened was somehow it was teaching me that if when I would exhale, if I would just let go, just let go, everything I was thinking, everything I was holding, everything I believed, just surrender, just let go when I exhaled, I would start to float up off of the brick alleyway. And that was really cool. I mean, that was really exciting, 7-year-old kid being able to float up. I mean, I was watching Superman on TV, and that was when it first came out, black and white. And so anyway, and so I get more and more adept at this. And then pretty soon I'm doing these big loop-de-loops coming up out of this alley and going up towards the platinum winter moon, big full moon, I remember. And then I'm swooping back down, the alleyway. So I'm doing these big loop-de-loops up towards the sky and the moon and then back down in between the church and the Sunday school. And I realized later that what that angel was teaching me, it was teaching me how to meditate. Because over these years, I started doing mind body practices in my early 20s, right before I had that big extraordinary consciousness experience, and uh, and these all the mind body practices, because I eventually I founded World Tai Chi and Qigong Day, which is held in over 100 countries, hundreds, maybe even thousands of cities, the last Saturday of every April, where people all over the planet come together and do Tai Chi and Qigong, and also yoga and meditation and mindfulness. A lot of these events have like a bigger mind body presentation and workshops and things like that. But anyway, these people do this all over the planet. And so I've been exposed to a lot of mind body practices, and I like yoga and mindfulness and meditation. It's all so synonymous with Tai Chi and Qigong, I've realized. But what they all have at their core is the breath. It's the breath. And what science shows is that when your in-breaths are it's not that your in-breaths are fast, but your exhales are longer and more gradual, where you're just kind of letting go and relaxing. And that's at the core of all these big five mind-body practices. I realized later, Dr. Herbert Benson at Harvard Medical School, he wrote a book called The Relaxation Response, and he put all the science together. And what he talked about was what I call the big five mind body practices that have tons of science behind them that show that they have profound benefits for us, intellectually, emotionally, physically, on every level. And so that's Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, meditation, and mindfulness. And the breath is at the core of all of them. And when I had one of the scientists on, he explained to us that when your exhales are longer than your inhales, that slows down the heart, slows down the brain, slows down the stress chemicals, reduces the stress chemicals going through the body, and it puts us into this alpha brainwave state. And the alpha brainwave state is a very magical state, it has profound healing potential. And and so that's what the angel was teaching me. It was teaching me how to meditate when I was 7 years old. And I remember what happened was I got really good at doing this. And I remember looking at the angel for approval, I guess. And and it had this look on its face like it was satisfied, like it had done its job. It was happy with my progress. And and then the next thing I remember was waking up in my bed the next morning. And man, I was so excited. I was going to go to school and teach all the kids how to fly. I mean, it was going to be so much fun. And so I remember grabbing my lunch bag and I'm running down the alley to go to my school. And I jump and I take a big breath, just like the angel was teaching me. And I jump up in the air and then I come splat down in a mud puddle. I couldn't fly. I couldn't fly. That was so disappointing. I was so disappointed. I was really looking forward to teaching all the kids how to fly. But then about 20 years later, I took my first mind body class, Tai Chi meditation class, because I was having some post-traumatic stress disorder issues. My father was in 3 years of frontline combat during World War II. And the last thing that his 45th Infantry Division did was they liberated the death camp Dachau. And so our house was haunted by that war. And when I had kids, I didn't like the way I was treating them. And so I started doing therapy. And my therapist just happened to be a guy that worked with Vietnam veterans at the VA. And he realized what was going on. And he said, Bill, he said, you ever tried mind body? He said, I think it might really help you. And I remember I was saying, what's that? And so described it to me. And so then I looked through catalog and I found a Tai Chi meditation class. And so that very first Tai Chi meditation class, I remember it was a young Qigong teacher and she was really attractive. I was in my 20s at the time. I was married, but I mean, she was still attractive. It wasn't that I was going to do anything. But anyway, I remember right before she took us into the meditation, she looked over at me and she had a little twinkle in her eye and she said, "You're going to like this." And so she took us through the meditation, and man, there was a point where I just felt like I was floating. I just felt like I was floating. Instantly, I remembered that angel. I remembered that angel when I was 7 years old. And so that's what made me remember that. And I had almost forgotten it really until that happened. And then what happened was life kicked me in the head. And the science shows that oftentimes we'll have like these huge, extraordinary consciousness experiences when we're at rock bottom. Because when the world falls apart around us, uh, we let go of all of our false beliefs about everything. It's like we're just completely open and vulnerable. And and so what happened with me was my mother passed away. I was there in the hospital room next to her procedure room with my family, and she passed away. And actually, I had an extraordinary consciousness experience when that happened. Uh, because she was just getting a routine angioplasty, and then so it's supposed to be simple procedure, not that dangerous really. And so we were, me but she, for some reason, she had called me and my siblings, and she asked us all to come to the hospital in Wichita, Kansas, where she was having it done. And what I found out later is that she had had a real serious heart procedure about a year before, and she didn't really say anything to any of us about it. She just went in and had it, and I didn't find out about it until she passed away, and then one of my sisters told me. But for some reason, for this routine angioplasty, which really wasn't supposed to be that dangerous, she called all of us. She called all of us to come to ask us if we would come for it, and I almost didn't go. Almost didn't go. When she told me it wasn't really that dangerous, because I had two small kids. I had a son and a job and mortgage payment in Southern California. That's pretty daunting. And and so I almost didn't come, but I did, and so did everybody. So did all my siblings. And so we're sitting there in that room with our father, and we're all just kind of sitting around joking. We're going to go out and have lunch after my mom finishes her procedure. And then the doctor came in and he pulled his mask down and he told us, he said she didn't make it. And man, I remember this wave of sorrow. I could see it. I could see it go around the room. I could see my sister-in-law just collapse in tears. She was sitting on a sofa. We were all sitting in a little living room that they had for people waiting. And and then the person next to her collapsed, and it just went all the way around the room like dominoes, one after the other, one after the other, one after the other. And it culminated with my father, and I was sitting on the arm of his chair. And me and him, we had a really tumultuous relationship because of his war experience. And, he was a hard man, but he was also beautiful, beautiful. I realized it took me a long time to comprehend what he had gone through. Uh, but and he just collapsed. And I never really heard him say anything religious. You go through a war, it's really hard to believe in God after going through what he went through. And so he wasn't like a Bible thumper or anything like that. And I'd never heard him say anything about God or ask God for anything or anything like that. But when that circle of collapse got all the way around the room, he collapsed. And I was sitting right on the arm of the chair he was sitting on, and I felt his body collapse. And I remember he said, "Oh, Jesus," he said, take care of that little girl." And that was the only religious thing I ever heard him say. And uh, and then and then I don't know, I just grabbed him and I just started kissing his head. And I said, "It's okay." I said, "She's with Jesus now." And and I was never really that religious either. It just, I don't know, it just came out of me. And but anyway, after this was all over, my sisters went to her hospital room to collect her things. And when I was out in the hallway, one of my sisters came up to me, and she wasn't like a real spiritual person. She never talked about spirituality or religion or anything like that. And she comes up to me, and her eyes are really wide, and she goes, "Did you feel that?" And I said, "What?" And she said, "Mom," she said, "her spirit went through all of us." She said, "Did you feel that?" And I didn't know what to say. I hadn't put all this together at that time, but then in time I remembered that collapse and how it had gone like dominoes falling all around the room. And so that was an extraordinary consciousness experience as well. But anyway, my mother, she ended up writing everybody notes the night before. She had a premonition she was going to die. I remember I gave her a copy of the Tao Te Ching to read in the hospital that night. You know, I figured she was bored. And that was right when I was starting to get into Tai Chi and meditation and stuff. And so I had a copy of the Tao Te Ching. And so I gave it to her. And so she wrote notes and put them in that book. Uh, and she had to have had a premonition she wasn't going to survive it. And one of the notes was to me. And I'd been trying to get my family to do mind body stuff since I found it, because it just makes you feel really good. It really helped me with my post-traumatic stress disorder and, angst and depression and, all that kind of stuff and emotions, emotional control, all that kind of stuff. And so I was trying to, turn everybody onto it in my family. And, they weren't interested. It was just weird stuff. And but anyway, in that note she wrote to me, she said, "I wish I could go back a few years and learn the arts of relaxation that you were trying to teach me." She said, "I so would have loved to have seen my grandchildren grow up." And I remember reading that note, but then that note ended up kind of getting stuck in a box somewhere, and I completely forgot about it. And then years later, I started teaching in hospitals, and people started healing from things, like what my mother died from. Old people in my classes, they were getting off of hypertension meds and they're healing from heart disease, all kinds of stuff. And and then I just happened to be digging through my basement. It was a synchronicity. And then I came across that note right years later, when I started teaching and teaching in those hospitals and seeing that happen. And I remember seeing that note about what she wrote. And then at the same time, realizing these doctors in my classes at that time were, healing from things like that. So she could have lived a lot longer. And so that really kind of threw me into teaching and educating people. And eventually that's kind of what led to the formation of the World Tai Chi and Qigong Day, because people weren't hearing about the science from their doctors. Because these doctors that were healing from these things, they started searching their hospital databases and handing me the research. And, at first I didn't understand why. I thought, well, I'm just a Tai Chi teacher, I'm not a doctor. But that stack just got bigger and bigger. And I realized something is being hidden from people. It's not being talked about in mainstream medicine and in popular culture and media culture. And it's because pharmaceutical money, it runs the healthcare system and it runs the media. That's where the news media, most of their funding comes from pharmaceutical companies. And I actually got an interview with the New York. I know I'm getting departing from the extraordinary consciousness experiences. I'm going to get back to that in a second. But over time, as World Tai Chi Day took off, I actually got an interview with the New York Times Sunday magazine. And at the time, that was the most read publication in the world on the planet. And the reporter was very excited because I was feeding her all this science on how mind body is shown, Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, meditation, mindfulness, how it's shown to have a profound healing effect on people, and that it could save society trillions of dollars if we were teaching this on a massive level in public schools and, senior care and healthcare in a big way. And yeah, she was excited. I think she thought she was going to get a Pulitzer. And then my mistake was I started bragging about it. We have like a global newsletter. Anybody can sign up for it. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I mean, it's become real apparent to me. I think pharmaceutical companies look at mind body like the competition because they know every person that we help, find their own self-healing power. That's a lot of money they're not going to make off that person for the rest of their life, in regular prescriptions. And so I was bragging about, oh, we're going to be in the New York Times. It's going to be this article. It's going to change everything, save society trillions of dollars, cut the healthcare spending dramatically, all this kind of stuff. Well, just a few days before, I think it was about 3 days, but it was a few days before the article was going to come out in the New York Times Sunday magazine. I was talking to the reporter and she was very angry. And what happened, I didn't realize what was going on. I thought maybe she was mad at me. I didn't really know what was going on. I didn't know her that well. I just knew that she was super excited about all this science I was giving her for the article. And but what I found out later was that the article, this multi-page, world-changing article that would have changed, God knows how many hundreds of millions of people's lives as this information spread around the planet through that article. It got cut from a multi-page article down to like three little paragraphs, just barely a paragraph. And it had none of the science in it. All that was cut out of it. And, I was still excited being in the New York Times Sunday magazine, a kid from a small Western Kansas farm town. We don't get in the New York Times, right, typically. And so anyway, I bought a whole bunch of copies of this. I started sending it out to my relatives and friends and stuff. And Then about a year later, I was visiting somebody that I'd sent it to in Scotland, and she said, "Have you looked at that New York Times Sunday magazine?" I said, "Well, yeah, I read the article a bunch of times. You know, I was excited about it. I read it over and over again a bunch of times." And she said, "No, have you looked at the magazine?" And I said, "No, I didn't." And she started flipping through it. Well, a pharmaceutical company had bought a big multi-page pharmaceutical ad, and that ate up all the column space. So that big multi-page article that was going to change the world got cut down to a little paragraph with none of the science. And that New York Times Sunday Times writer, uh, they get paid by the column inch. And so she lost a lot of money. She lost a lot of money. But the New York Times Sunday magazine got a lot of money from that pharmaceutical ad. And it denied all these people around the world this science that could have had a huge impact on healthcare, the economy, people's well-being, quality of life, education system, everything. And so anyway, yeah, so that's where, my mother's note led to eventually was creating World Tai Chi Days so that we could create these public spectacles. And it was so bizarre seeing like masses of people do Tai Chi. The media couldn't resist it and they'd come and cover it. And then we taught the organizers how to take that media or microphone and then tell people about the science. And so at worldtaichiday.org, we have a medical research library under Tai Chi and Qigong tab. And you can look up 100 common health issues, and it'll show you the science on how Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, meditation, and mindfulness are proven to help treat that health condition. And so that's what my mother's note all led to. So these little extraordinary consciousness experiences that we have, they can lead to really huge things. So my mother had one when she had a premonition that she was going to die the next day, and then that's got her to write the note. And then my sister found the note, and then I held on to the note. It didn't really have a huge impact on my life at that moment, but then years later, and maybe that note did lead eventually to me becoming a mind body teacher. I don't know. But then years later, when I got my first hospital class and I saw these old doctors healing and handing me the science and stuff, my mother's note I found in the basement right at that time. So that was a synchronicity. And so that's why I wanted to mention this, because these extraordinary consciousness experiences that we have, they can seem really small and insignificant, but there's something in our mind that will go, "Oh, that was important." But then it's so easy to forget that that was important, or to dismiss that it wasn't, think or that, oh, it was a dream or whatever, and just go on with busy life. And so I guess that's the main purpose of this video, is to encourage people. I think we're at a time on the planet where people are going to be having more and more and more of these things. And more and more and more and more people are doing mind body practices all around the planet as well, which the science shows when you practice, meditation and these practices on a regular basis, you'll have more extraordinary consciousness experiences. But the other thing that was crucial, and that's the other thing that I want to really bring home in this video, is how important it is to journal. Start journaling. It's emotionally purging. I got to where I'm a poet now. I write poetry. And so for me, it's like anytime something traumatic comes and happens in my life, it's an opportunity for me to feel it and write a poem. So journaling is it's just really good for us emotionally and psychologically. Forget about all the mystical magic part of it. But just for that reason, it's good to journal. And don't try to make it look good or make it make sense. Just write from the heart. Just kind of let your hand just go on autopilot. Just write whatever comes through your heart. And that's what I was led to do. And so the first adult experience that I had after I had that childhood experience, that happened after, like I was saying, my mother passed away. I was in my early 20s. My son was only a year old, and my mother passed away. And then a few months later, my father passed away. And then a few months after that, my youngest son, at that time, I had three children when this happened. And my youngest son went into a coma and went to the hospital and was in a coma for a month, and then he passed away. So within just a period of a few months, I lost my mother, my father, and my youngest son. So like all my tethers to the future, my tethers to the past, it it was like a bomb was set in my consciousness, and it just kind of just shattered everything that I was. And I was losing faith in everything. I just started drinking a lot, smoking way too much, and it would have killed me because I had hepatitis C at the time, but the mind body had healed me. And it probably would have healed me for the rest of my life, but eventually it came to haunt me later on in my life. But that's like a whole other story. But the uh, I'm sorry, my phone was dinging over there, and it took me out of my frame of consciousness here. Let me try to remember where I was going with this. Yeah, so like I was saying, it's not uncommon for these huge, extraordinary consciousness experiences. In yoga, they call it samadhi. It's when we open up to this energetic nature of our being. But it's not uncommon to have these huge experiences when life levels us, because then we're open. We're open. We're not holding on to any false, beliefs about who we are or what our life is or anything, because it's like we've just lost everything. And so then our heart's open, our mind's open. And so what happened with me was I had an epiphany. I was just looking at my two other kids. They were little. And I just realized, I just couldn't like drink and smoke myself to death. Because that's where it was headed. I mean, I was still working. I was functional. I wasn't, in the street or anything. But I just, I knew that my other two kids needed me, and it kind of pulled me a little bit out of it. And I just had this epiphany, and I just realized I didn't want to go out that way. And so I ended up, pouring whatever booze I had down the sink, and then I threw my pack of cigarettes away, and I pulled out some old dusty running shoes that hadn't been used in a long time. And I pulled them out and I put them on and I just started running like Forrest Gump. And I just started running. And I got to where I actually was running some 5Ks and stuff. And I just threw myself into meditation because I had let go of all that stuff. I started meditating, doing Tai Chi, Qigong, and I stopped watching the news. I stopped reading newspapers. I stopped listening to the radio. I was just, all I wanted was space and peace. And, uh, and then one night, I was feeling really troubled, because of everything that I'd gone through. And I just realized that I don't really know why we're here. It's like I was starting to kind of pull myself out of it for my other two kids, but I still had this serious doubt about what's the purpose of life, because I had so much just ripped away from me so fast. And, I was a very relatively young man, in my early 20s. And and so anyway, I did something that I hadn't done since I was a really little kid. And I got down on the side of my bed and I got down on my knees and I put my hands together like this. And it wasn't like I was praying to God, but I was just doing a shout out to who, if there's anything out there. And I said, if there's some reason why we're here, why we're here in this life, I'm not getting it. I'm just not, I'm just not getting it. And I need to know. I need to know. And I was really feeling, really heart-centered. I need to know. And then I laid down in bed and I started meditating. And then I fell asleep. And then about 3 o'clock in the morning, again, like the middle of the night, and I remember it was 3 o'clock in the morning because when it happened, I looked over at the clock in the dark of our bedroom and it was 3 a.m. And I learned a lot about 3 a.m. being real common for these kind of experiences later, and I'll maybe get into that later. So if you have an experience in the middle of the night, it could be an extraordinary consciousness experience. But it doesn't have to be in the middle of the night. But anyway, so what happened was all of a sudden I'm sitting up. So I was laying in bed meditating and went to sleep. And at 3 a.m. I wake up, but I'm not in bed. I'm sitting on the end of my bed, sitting up, and this this uh, being, and it gets kind of confusing here because it wasn't a verbal voice, but it was just as clear as a verbal voice. It was like right in my mind. And at the time, I think I thought it was a verbal voice. But then over time, I started going back and trying to, because I wrote a lot about this. And so, it was like it became clearer as I wrote about it. And this voice, it said, I am about to show you what life could be like, what it could be like. So it's like we have an option. We have a choice of what we want our lives to be. So it wasn't like this is. It wasn't like it was saying this is what life is. It was saying this is what life could be. And all of a sudden, it just touched me right in the center of my brain, and this light lit in my brain. It was soft and soothing and powerful and expansive. And I mean, it was just all. It was me. It was everything, all at once. And then within an instant, it touched me right in the center of my heart. And then same thing, man, this light just expanded. And pretty soon these two lights are just all one big expanding light. And I am this big expanding light. And I remember I looked up and I saw the ceiling of our bedroom just like rushing at me. And then I could see the slats in the attic. And then all of a sudden I'm looking down at the roof of our house in Southern California, Huntington Beach, and it's getting smaller. And then California is getting smaller, the coastline's getting smaller, and the Earth's getting smaller, and the moon's out there, and the stars are out there. And man, it's this huge expansion. And I'm like, wow. And it was just so incredibly beautiful. It was like, oh my God, it was like my heart was like a million miles large and I could feel everything. It was like, over time as I started writing about this, it was like I could feel everybody on the planet in my heart. And one of the things that I walked away from that with was I just realized that we are all going through the same things. We think that we're this lonely person a lot of times when we go into that mode, that the universe doesn't like. No, no, no. All these things that we feel, all these doubts, all these hopes, all these fears, all these loves, this is of the music of humanity. We're all feeling the same thing. We're all going through the same things. And I remember when I came back from this, uh, that next day, it was just like everything was just really soft and calm. And the people that I met, it was like they were just beautiful. It was like I would just have these conversations with people that were really deep and profound. And I was working in a corporation where people didn't have these kind of conversations. But it was just like everybody was just like, my friend. It just felt this way. And I remember many years later, I was reading or I was seeing a video by Alan Watts. And Alan Watts he was like an integral part of my Tai Chi and Qigong and meditation journey when I first started it. And but anyway, I didn't realize it, but he had several extraordinary consciousness experiences. He didn't talk about them. He talked about philosophy and life. He was a genius. If he's on YouTube, you can watch Alan Watts. And but anyway, he was talking about his extraordinary consciousness experiences in one video that I saw on YouTube many years later, decades later. And he said that one thing that's very common is that when we come back from these extraordinary consciousness experiences, we see the divine in everyone's eyes. And when I heard him say that, I thought, oh, that's what I was feeling. And for months, I just wasn't watching TV or listening, doing any of that kind of intellectual stuff. It was just the beach, Tai Chi, Qigong. I mean, I had to work, but even in my work, I was just like, I wouldn't get too tangled up. I'd work and then I'd breathe and allow space and, kind of stay in that, kind of contemplative consciousness. And then I was writing. And that was another thing that happened. When I came back from this experience, what happened was I got scared. I had this huge expansion experience, and all of a sudden I got scared. And the instant that I got scared, everything slammed back. It was like everything slammed back in reverse. And all of a sudden I'm just like, woof, like back on the end of my bed. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, wow, like what happened? Now my wife's still sleeping. So I get up. I can't sleep. I get up and I go out in the kitchen in my underwear and I'm standing there and I'm thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do? There's no way I'm going to go back to sleep. And I just happened to glance over at the counter, the kitchen counter, and there was a pen and paper there. And this voice that had said that I'll show you what life could be like. I'm about to show you what life could be like. It's like when I looked at that pen and paper, that voice said, "Write." And that is how everything in my life unfolded because I started writing. I spent that whole night writing about what had happened to me and just things that were coming through me. And this went on for like 6 months. And so it's so important that we start journaling. And when you start journaling, you're going to start remembering extraordinary consciousness experiences. And it's going to be something that's going to unfold. And it doesn't mean that you're going to organize a world event that's going to actually change global consciousness. And I'll tell you the science on this is really mind blowing. But it's just, the more that I understand about it, the more I realize, yeah, that was great that all this led to me organizing this world event that got hundreds of millions of people aware of the science on mind body practices and that actually changed global consciousness. I'll tell you the science on that in a second. But the more that I come to terms with what happened and the real meaning behind all this, I realize that if I go to the gym and I just happen to be walking by somebody who's in a bad state, in doldrums, and when I go to the gym, or when I go anywhere, I try to meditate before I go in, and then I try to be in an open state, and then when I go in, I just consider everybody my friend. And so, if I'll see somebody come, going into the gym or something, maybe they were having a bad day or something, and I'll just be going, "Hey, hey, how's it going?" And, "Oh, yeah, nice day, huh?" So just stuff like that. And a lot of times you'll see people light up when you do stuff like that. Even people that look grumpy, that don't look like they want anybody to talk to them. If I say, "Hey, hey, how's it going?" Man, I'll just see like a shift. It's like their eyes will light up. And what I've come to realize is it's not the big grand, there's no difference between a big grand thing and that moment that you have with any, any, any being, any creature, if it's sacred, and it is, anytime we connect, it's sacred. And what all the science has shown me is the foundation of the universe is compassion and love. And this is scientific reality. If you read the Gospel of Science, second edition, by the time you get through it, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And so that journaling, that writing, and also I'm hoping that this will help everybody find their esteem and realize that you're sacred. You are sacred. I'm not trying to convert you in any religion. I don't even know whether I have a religion or not. I mean, it's like I love, I read the things Jesus said, about, you know, love and kindness and compassion and self-forgiveness. And all these things make perfect sense, and scientifically they make perfect sense. Buddha said beautiful things. Muhammad said beautiful things, Krishna, I mean, there's beauty and wisdom in all the different aspects of the earth. And so I'm not trying to convince anybody of a religion or anything like that. But it's just this knowing that everybody, all of you, all of us, each of us, yeah, we're sacred. And it's so easy for the world to beat us down and make us feel like we're morons and make us feel like nothing that we think or say or believe or feel matters. But when we connect with people, when we go into that heart consciousness, and we realize that other people are valuable and sacred. And I'm not talking about a religious thing. I'm just talking about the reality of it. Uh, you know, and that's what mind body practices teach us when we meditate on a regular basis. We realize that every moment of our lives, it's as profound and meaningful and moving and sacred as we decide it's going to be, or it's as meaningless and mundane and stupid as we decide it's going to be. And and all these practices and recording all these experiences and putting them together in the book and everything like that. What it's convinced me, and I've had to keep convincing myself of this because the world will beat you down. But I mean, it's every moment is sacred. It's just where is our consciousness? Where do we let our consciousness go? And I'm not saying that I'm above depression and anxiety and all these things. I have all these things. I mean, we're all human beings. I'm not trying to tell anybody that I'm special or different or anything like that. I'm just sharing my experiences in the hope that that it will give you validation and support that I never had. Because I got beat up a lot when I started talking about this stuff, and I don't want other people to go through this. And I think it's really important at this time on the planet for all of us to become more comfortable with that sacredness that we are, and to let it come forth and start journaling, start writing, and knowing that what we feel and what we think is an important thing. I'm not saying everything that we think or whatever is life altering or world altering or anything like that, but it's just important for us to be authentic, and be open and be real, because real big things are trying to come through all of us. And it may be things that happen just in our personal lives. We might treat somebody kindly that ends up treating somebody else kindly, that ends up saving somebody else in some way. And that person ends up becoming somebody that invents something, that is able to produce limitless free energy. I mean, it's like we just don't know where it's all. One thing that extraordinary consciousness experience showed me was that there, behind all what we think of as chaos, there is this incredible, elegant order. And things are unfolding in this incredibly beautiful way. And it's all headed to the expansion of love and compassion in all of our lives and hearts and minds and throughout the whole planet. And this ripples and echoes out through the whole universe because everything's connected. And in my book, I get into quantum entanglement and how everything's connected, and the science on all this. All this science is so beautiful, and the science is so validating, because I was never somebody, who could be told something spiritual and go, "Oh, okay, I believe that. I'm a believer. I'm 100% there." I had to see science. Well, I had to have an experience, and being aware that these experiences are possible will enable you to have them, and also perhaps, like I did, remember that you've had them, and they just got filed away somewhere. And so all this can contribute to your experiences, and your experiences are profound and meaningful. And it could be anything. Maybe you'll end up writing a story or writing a poem, or just in having an encounter with somebody. But it's like the mind body practices. One of the things that they do, the brain, the empathy and compassion parts of the brain gets larger and more effective, and the stress and fear part of the brain gets smaller. It actually physically shrinks. And so as we practice these things, we're in states of compassion and connection, much more. And so then that ripples out through society and through the people that we meet. And so it enables us to move more and more into states where we're walking more and more in a state of love. And that's what the science shows, is that's when our consciousness is the most powerful. So even when we're just in meditative states, when we're just really enjoying the beauty of our existence and the universe, the beauty, the healing, the safety of the universe that we're floating in, that the science shows that ripples out and it changes society. And you'll see, if you get the Gospel of Science second edition, you'll see studies in there where if you have 1%, the equivalent of 1% of a city's population, high level meditators, it dramatically reduces the violent crime rates, the emergency room visits, all this kind of stuff. So we live in this huge field of energy, and our consciousness vibrating in states of compassion and love, and just enjoying, they call it heart-centered consciousness or gratitude consciousness, just enjoying the experience of our being and not being driven by fear and angst. That profoundly has a healing effect on the whole planet. And one of the reasons that I wrote the book and that I'm doing these videos is because the mass media is it's a fear machine. And I get into all this in the book. This isn't conspiracy theory. This is economic fact. Mass media found out that if they can frighten us and upset us, it releases stress chemicals. And the stress chemicals cause us to be addicted. It gives you kind of a high. And so we keep coming back. We keep coming back to that stressful information. Mass media, it focuses on the most horrific potential things. And in many, many cases, it's a really distorted picture of reality. Now, I know in my classes, when I start talking about this, people who've invested their whole lives in the media, and I know how they feel. I've been there too. I've been a media junkie. I've been a news junkie. I'm an information guy. I'm constantly collecting information. But I found out corporate mainstream news is not where you're going to get real information. It's all fear-based. And I know, from teaching these classes, when I started talking about this stuff, the people that were where I used to be, that are all locked into all that kind of stuff. Because I remember I had a friend that would say, "Bill, why do you watch that crap?" And I said, "Well, I'm waiting. I'm trying to get some." And he said, "You're not going to get it." And I thought he was wrong and stupid, and I didn't like him interfering with my love affair with, people have these love affairs with Sean Hannity or Rachel Maddow or Wolf Blitzer or whatever. And then when you when you say that those people aren't really good for you, they'll get really mad. They'll get really mad at you, and so I've had to come to terms with that. But yeah, the mass media, it's giving us a distorted picture of ourselves and reality and the potential for humanity. And what the Gospel of Science does is the second edition is it provides all this science and data that shows how powerful and beautiful we are, and also some incredibly beautiful things that are happening all over the planet. For example, violent crime rates are at a 40-year low in the United States. Now, in my classes, when I mention that, I get a lot of people that go, "Wait, what? Yeah, are you crazy? Don't you watch the news?" I watch the news. Crime's out of control. No, it's not. That's how they get us hooked on the stress chemicals. Violent crime rates are at 40-year lows. FBI data, it's in the Gospel of Science. And the UN data shows this is happening in many countries around the world. The world is not this horrible, evil, dangerous place that's on the edge of apocalypse. I mean, we can make it that way if we all walk around living in fear. Then what happens is we put more and more people in prisons. We start more and more wars because the only way that you can be sure some horrible evil person's not going to get you is if you get them first. And then we end up spending all of our money on weapons and prisons and police. That's not what we're here for. There's a whole new world that's trying to be born. And mind body teachers can be a big part of this. So if you're a mind body teacher, it's really important that you don't just teach the technology of meditation or Tai Chi or Qigong or mindfulness or yoga. It's important that you come to terms with reality and the reality, get a reality-based view of the world. And the Gospel of Science second edition can provide you with that, as well as science that can help you convince people that they should be doing your yoga classes or your Tai Chi classes or your meditation classes or whatever. So it has that science, but then it also has the science showing how we are part of an unfolding, beautiful possibility for humanity. And what the Gospel of Science second edition ultimately led to was the formation of the Global Transformation Project. Go to globaltransformationproject.org, and you'll see we're building a global movement of scientists, educators, health experts, and mind-body experts advocating for mind-body education to become a core part of public education worldwide, so that kids can be learning how to stay in touch with the alpha brainwave state, that meditative, magical state. We're in alpha brainwave state most of the time as children up to about age 7. And then we lose touch with it. We start getting, education system, socialization, all the linear things, the worries, fears, all the stresses, all that stuff. And then we lose touch with that alpha state. But the mind body practices are shown to help us maintain a connection to that alpha state. And when we were children, we healed at an incredibly accelerated rate. And we also learned at an incredibly accelerated rate. So this would change the whole future of the planet, and it would save society trillions of dollars in saved healthcare, police, courts, prison costs, all these different kind of costs. If we were teaching kids kindergarten through 12th grade how to practice these mind-body practices, and they can be taught in age-appropriate ways from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. I've taught in all kinds of levels of public education. And so this can be easily done. Go to globaltransformationproject.org, look at the science, look at some of the leading minds that are supporting this, and you can sign the petition and you can share the petition. And one of the biggest things that is beautiful about you sharing that petition is not just that it helps us get petition signatures that we can take to the United Nations and to educators all over the world, but the other thing that it does is it gives people a more hopeful view, a reality-based and science-based view of the future. And so people need to know that the world is not, we're not on the edge of a zombie apocalypse here. We're at the beginning of a extraordinary new age of possibility. And it all starts right here, right here. And anyway, I'm thinking about doing weekly free Zoom classes, mind body Zoom classes, on a donation basis. I'm hoping maybe it'll help raise funds for World Tai Chi and Qigong Day and the Global Transformation Project. But anybody's going to be completely welcome to attend these classes for free. Because I don't want anybody to feel like they can't do it because these mind body practices that I teach in these classes, I teach through hospitals. They've helped people get off heal from all kinds of chronic health issues and stuff, and also stress, anxiety, depression. And so I'm hoping that anybody who feels called to it will attend it, whether you can afford it or not. Because I know that a lot of people in the world are having trouble financially. Tai Chi teachers aren't rich. I know exactly how people are doing because if people are hurting around me economically, nobody pays for a Tai Chi class. If everybody's doing well economically, then lots of people come to Tai Chi classes. So I have my finger on the pulse, and I know I'm not rich. I know how it is. So I want everybody to come for free if you can't afford it. But if you got a good retirement and you can afford to donate, we'll give you ways to do it. So just email me at WTCQD2000 at AOL.com. And and even if you teach mind body practices, I invite you to come. You can pick up because I've been teaching in hospitals and in the Midwest. I figured out a lot of ways to kind of make this stuff tangible to people. Less esoteric, less mystical, and more science-based and tangible. And that really helps people. So even if you are already a very effective mind body teacher of Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, meditation, mindfulness, whatever, you can come to the classes and just get a little stress management for yourself. I take other people's classes. I do yoga with Adrian on YouTube. I like to let another teacher be in the driver's seat once in a while. But you may also pick up tips on how to explain this to people and some of the science, and stuff like that. So it can actually help you become a better teacher. Other teachers have made me the teacher that I am today. So we got to get over this idea that we're all in competition and that we're all each other's opponents and all that kind of stuff. Mind body teachers, we're not. We're all one big mind body family. We're all trying to change the planet, one central nervous system at a time. All right. So yeah, if you email me WTCQD2000 at AOL.com and put in the subject line, Bill, live online free Zoom classes or something like that. And then I'll keep all those emails. And then when we have enough people to start the Zoom class, then I'll let everybody know. And I'm planning on doing them on Thursday afternoons, but if that's impossible, everybody let me know. I may end up doing it on a Saturday or Sunday, if Thursday afternoons are impossible for too many people. So yeah, email me and let me know. And that would be great. And again, the new second edition of the Gospel of Science, it's available in paperback. It's available on Kindle ebook for $9.99. And then what I found is that if you buy it on the Kindle and then you go back in and you buy the Audible version, Amazon gives you the Audible version for $1.99. And so you could get the Audible and the ebook with all the graphics and the links and everything to the science for less than you could just get the Audible book. So that's a pretty good deal. And I'm not a big Amazon fan, but if you're an author, I mean, the Gospel of Science, it's available through booksellers all over the planet. So if you truly despise Amazon, you can yeah, you can find it anywhere. But the Audible's on Amazon Audible. And yeah, I listen to it myself once in a while because the world can beat me down too. I can forget all this beautiful, hopeful science, reality-based science, and I can get sucked up into the mire of the desperation and desolation that the false reality that the world creates around us propagates. And you can forget how beautiful people are and how beautiful and nurturing the universe is. And so I listen to my own Audible book once in a while to be reminded of all this stuff, so that I can, remind myself to stay in tune, stay in touch with this deeper core of our being, through these mind body practices. So anyway, I hope you'll maybe we can just wrap up with a quick meditation here. So just letting the eyes close easily and naturally, and feeling the tip of the tongue lightly touch the gum line. And just feeling that sensation brings us back from the world, more into the here and now. And now feeling the cool waves of breath, filling us from the abdomen all the way up through the airy fibers of the lungs. And on those sighing exhales, as the shoulders relax down and away from the neck, it's as though everything that we are could let go of everything that we've held into. Letting go of the day and the week, any plans that we have later on this gorgeous day. So that each releasing breath finds us falling deeper and deeper into the center of where we are, right here and right now. And as we breathe and let go of our grip on ourselves again and again, there's just more and more space for an openness and a lightness. Letting the head and the heart and our whole field just let go, sigh, open. Be lifted in this lightness and openness, radiance. Feel our heart opening, our huge heart. Our electromagnetic heart has been measured 32 feet across. It's huge and big. And that's just the beginning of the heart. As we breathe and let go of our squeeze on ourselves again and again, there's just more and more space for that openness and that lightness in the center of the mind and the center of the heart as well. Letting ourselves just drift into neutral, get lost in this opening lightness and the safety of the nurturing universe. Letting the brain stem and the old brain in the back of the head sigh and let go of all that panic and fear stuff that we squeeze back there, so that it can bathe in the safety of that opening lightness. And we can just continue to bathe in this light and safety as we go through our day, breathing and letting go of our grip so that there's space for safety and light. And that is the reality of the universe. We're safe right now. Good. And we can just continue floating in this even as we continue on through our day. Now, if you go to our YouTube channel, if you do a search for at global, if you go to YouTube, your YouTube app on your TV, and then do a search for at sign at Global Transformation Project, but there's no spaces, just at Global Transformation Project with no spaces, all one thing. And then after that, two other words, Bill Douglas. So at Global Transformation Project, Bill Douglas. And you can subscribe to the channel. It's free. And then you'll see playlists there, and the playlist will have tutorials with mind body practices, and it's not just all mind teaching; it's all kinds of teaching. Dr. Joe Dispenza, Dr. Bruce Lipton, yoga with Adrian. I put anything up there that I found great benefit from, so that it's an easy go-to source for my students and for anybody that wants to uh, yeah, have access to these kind of resources. And then also have some things there on diet, on avoiding seed oils, for example, and on how great saunas are for us. Our saunas are an incredible antidepressant. They produce huge amounts of endorphins. And so, just all kinds of life-altering things. If you go to at Global Transformation Project, Bill Douglas channel on YouTube, uh, and uh, and then you can just kick back and you can see the interviews that we did with all these scientists and all this. Yeah, you can kind of create a sphere of consciousness and entertainment that will bolster your life journey of mind body. And so that's what I've tried to create and with that YouTube channel. And again, it's all free. There's no angle here. I mean, I do hope everybody will buy the book. I mean, I could use a few bucks, but I give it away. I give the book, the second edition of Gospel of Science. I give it away every year, all day on World Tai Chi Day, World Yoga Day, and on World Peace Meditation Day. And because those are all 3 days. Oh yeah, I was going to tell you how World Tai Chi Day changed global consciousness. After we started organizing World Tai Chi Day, I found out about a research project called the Global Consciousness Project, which was started by the past 20-year director of research at Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Laboratory. And they studied human consciousness. And they found out that human consciousness could actually affect physical reality and also affect their computers. And so Dr. Nelson started the research project called the Global Consciousness Project. And they put these computers all over the planet, and they could see changes in their data when global consciousness went into states of coherent consciousness. So the first thing they noticed was when Princess Diana funeral, because she was loved all over the planet. She was doing some beautiful things. She was trying to get forced, the big militarized countries to have to go into these small countries and remove the landmines after the wars, so that kids wouldn't be getting their legs blown off for decades after that. So she was very beloved. She was doing some really beautiful things. Very courageous woman. And so they saw their computers go off track during her funeral. And so then they started looking at organized events that were centered around connection and healing and compassion. And so one of them was World Tai Chi Day, and and all this data is in the Gospel of Science, and you can see that during the 24-hour period of World Tai Chi Day, when people all over the planet were doing mind body together and going to coherent consciousness, that it measurably increased coherence in global consciousness for everybody on the whole planet. And 15 years later, after World Tai Chi Day was founded, the United Nations founded the International Day of Yoga, or World Yoga Day. And that too was shown on their computers to increase coherence in global consciousness. And then also World Peace Meditation Day, December 31st, was shown to increase coherence in global consciousness. And what happens is, as I mentioned earlier, is when large groups of people around the planet go into coherent consciousness, it reduces crime and conflict around the whole planet. And the whole planet is vastly less violent than it's ever been before in human history. Violent crime rates are at 40-year lows in most of the world. And all this data is all in the uh, Gospel of Science. So I'm not asking you to take anything I say on faith. I have it all meticulously annotated with the science that you can go and see that. So, so I hope you enjoyed the meditation, and I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you'll spread these, because YouTube doesn't favor us in their algorithms. We get suppressed. Uh, we're there was a time when our meditation videos would, get tens of thousands or even 100,000 or so views, but they don't anymore. The only way that people find out about what we're telling and offering is if the person that I'm talking to, if you actually put it on your social media, and if you subscribe to the channel, and if you like the channel, and if you copy the link to these videos and send them to people that you know and post them in social media. That's the only way that this message gets spread. It's not going to happen through some magical, CNN's not going to report on it, and YouTube's not going to promote it. And the social media diminishes. When we organized World Tai Chi Day, we were contacting Tai Chi and Qigong groups all over the planet through social media, Facebook, Twitter, whatever. And they all suppress this. They don't let people organize the way they used to on social media. It's all being controlled and suppressed. And so when we try to contact the Tai Chi and Qigong groups that are connected with us on Facebook, they only let us contact about 12 of them now. And then they just shut us down. They put us in Facebook jail. And that's how we organize World Tai Chi Day. I mean, it's disheartening. But how it can be heartening is if whoever you are right now that is listening to this video, if you got something out of this, or if you get something out of our channel, put it on your social media. They can't stop that. If people actually like and subscribe and share videos like this, really, because I do, like with Dr. Joe Dispenza, Bruce Lipton, or, Dr. Uh, Herbert Benson, any of these people who've changed my life. I spend a lot of time, telling other people about these resources and about these people and about the work that they did. And it's been really kind of disheartening for me to see how few people are doing that with what we do. I mean, there was a time when they didn't need to do that because the algorithms weren't working against us, but they are now. And so the only way anybody's going to find out about this is if you copy the link and you put it on your social media. And if you go to Global Transformation Project and sign the petition and you share globaltransformationproject.org through your social media and encourage other people to sign the petition, it's not going to happen for you. You are going to have to do it. Just like I had to sit down and do this video, and I have to put this video on YouTube. So, we got to own up to we're sacred. We're playing a sacred role on the planet. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. And if you tune in on our channel, and you can email us, and if you're interested in maybe doing the free online live Zoom classes, just let us know. It'll be a lot of fun. Thanks a lot.